So you want to drop that skateboard thong so I can get up in them guts behind Xavier's pool house? I thought you were a married man. Ain't stopped me before. I've been hitting it from behind ever since back in the day. I mean, you know how I was. I walked out on my wife, went to get with Jean Grey after she came back to life. And I was stepping to other women even before that. But I thought you were the good, noble leader of the X-Men. No, I'm the Dirty Mac in disguise, man. I'm the Dirty Mac, man. I'm the Dirty Mac, baby. I gets all them ladies.
Now available in paperback, John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed John Haynes series adventure. Pick up your copy of John Haynes at Death's Door at Amazon.com and other online booksellers everywhere. One of my viewers wanted me to talk about why Emma Frost was always jealous of Scott Summers and Jean Grey's marriage and relationship. Well, I need to correct the viewer because Emma Frost was never really jealous of Scott Summers and Jean Grey's relationship. No, the problem was that Scott Summers had been made into a whoremonger male by writer Chris Claremont. Now, your Scott Summers was always the nice guy of the X-Men, and as the nice guy of the X-Men, he was one of these characters who was possibly prone to going out here and hurting people, but because that's what nice guys usually do. Now, your nice guys oftentimes are jealous of other men, and your Scott Summers definitely possibly was jealous of the other X-Men, like Warren Worthington, the Angel, who was a millionaire, Hank McCoy, the Beast, who was a genius, and Bobby Drake, the Iceman, who was just a playful, fun guy who had a way with the ladies. Now, your Scott Summers was always a square, straight-laced guy who always felt reserved because of his powers, which were the ability to shoot beams of force from his eyes, and because of this ability to shoot beams from the force from his eyes, he wound up not looking to go out here and be the man he wanted to be. Instead, he wanted to go out here and follow behind Charles Xavier because he didn't have the confidence to go out here and be that hero that he wanted to be. Now, your Scott Summers oftentimes feared going out here and living a life that he wanted to live because he was afraid that his eyes would hurt someone. So this is why he went out here and dedicated himself to Professor Xavier's mission and became his prized pupil, and then later on became the field commander of the X-Men. Now, he was a very competent leader of the X-Men and managed to keep the team in order on missions. However, he really lacked good social and interpersonal skills outside of the job, and when your Jean Grey came to the X-Men, he was very withdrawn and didn't want to go out here and try to shoot his shot. And because he didn't shoot his shot with Jean Grey, what happened was Warren Worthington came out and shot his shot and wound up getting with Jean Grey, and they wound up dating in the earlier issues of the X-Men. Now, as your Warren Worthington, the Angel, was out here living his life and enjoying a relationship with Jean Grey, your Scott was sitting in the back pining for Jean, talking about how he wanted to get with her, but that was basically him looking to, as I see it, Dirty Mac, because a lot of times the Dirty Mac is the guy, he only wants the woman because other guys have the woman, and what they really want are two things. What they want is, one, they want to be cool like the other guy, and two, what they also want is what the idea of the woman is. They don't want the woman, they want what they think the woman is. And when it came down to your Scott Summers, I always believed that he only wanted the idea of what Jean Grey was, and he also wanted to have Jean Grey as an attachment because he saw that Jean was getting a lot of attention, and he wanted that attention for himself. So he didn't really want Jean, and that was possibly one of the major plot points that writers like Chris Claremont overlooked as they were going out here and Scott and Jean got together after Warren and Herb broke up. That was a story point that they didn't really explore in the classic comic book saga known as the Phoenix Saga from Chris Claremont. Dave Cockrum, the late Dave Cockrum, and John Byrne. They didn't really explore how your Scott was really in love with the idea of Jean Grey, because the Phoenix really wasn't Jean Grey. It was the Phoenix Force taking on her form. And when I look at that story, it really was that Scott Summers really didn't love Jean. He loved the idea of Jean, because your Phoenix was basically the idea of Jean Grey, and it was fit and molded to what it thought Jean Grey was. So Scott was out here involved not with the real Jean Grey, but he was involved with an idea of Jean Grey, and he fought and for that idea over the course of the Phoenix Saga in the classic later issues of the Dark Phoenix Saga. Now, in the aftermath of the Dark Phoenix Saga, we really see that Scott never really loved Jean. Yes, he grieved Jean Grey and her so-called passing, when it really was just the Phoenix sacrificing his life to save the universe. But what Scott Summers was really in love with was the idea of Jean Grey, and that really showed later on when writer Chris Claremont basically destroyed the character when he decided to have your Scott Summers get involved with a woman who looked exactly like Jean Grey, called Madeline Pryor. Now, once your Scott Summers got involved with Madeline Pryor, that's when the character went completely off the rails and went from a textbook beta male nice guy to becoming a whoremonger male who was basically looking to use Madeline Pryor because she fit the idea of what Jean Grey was. Now, your Scott Summers wound up marrying Madeline Pryor, and once he married Madeline Pryor, he then wound up having a baby with her called Nathan Summers, and he was building a family as he was leading the X-Men, and then eventually he then wound up becoming a part of a group called X Factor once Jean Grey was revealed to have come back to life by the Fantastic Four when they found her at the bottom of New York's Harlem River, I believe. Now, after the Fantastic Four found Jean Grey at the bottom of the river, that's when Scott Summers basically abandoned his entire family. And once he abandoned his entire family to be with Jean Grey, when he formed the team X Factor, he was basically looking to go out here and MACK Jean Grey. Even though he was already married and had a child, he was out here looking to go out here and do the Dirty Mac one mo gim, and he did the Dirty Mac one mo gim because he was out here looking to get with the whole idea again of this woman, and he wanted the real idea of who she was. So he was never really in love with the real Jean Grey. He was in love with an idea that he had made up in his head, and that was really shown with his actions once he joined the Team X Factor. Now, your writers like Chris Claremont and many others tried to make it look real nice, but Scott Summers really was a jerk all throughout all of this, because he was out here looking again to Dirty Mac your Jean Grey while she was with Warren Worthington. He then, as Jean Grey allegedly passed away and became the Phoenix, he was still chasing the ideas and fantasies that he had. And then, after she came back, he abandoned his family. So that shows us that your Scott Summers really was not out here looking to do right by Jean. He was looking to maintain his idea and fantasy regarding Jean Grey. And eventually he wound up going out here and being able to finally actualize his fantasy by marrying Jean Grey and then having his world completely smooth, because he finally had what he thought was the ideal of Jean Grey, and he finally had the real woman, not knockoffs or clones like Madeline Pryor. And what happened with your Scott Summers was he was content for a season, but your Emma Frost came into his mind, and again, she wasn't really jealous of Scott Summers. Your Scott Summers basically was a whoremonger male. He felt that he had his world completely smooth, that he had everything the way he wanted, so he felt like he could go out here and go get himself some Emma on the side, and he had himself some Emma on the side until Jean eventually found out, And again, writers looking to protect Scott Summers from his whoremonger image basically went out here and led to the death of Jean Grey one more again. And they only killed Jean so that they could go out here and protect Scott's image and reputation, because Scott Summers at the end of the day was looking like a whoremonger male once again. And that's what your Scott Summers basically was looking like, a cad, a womanizer, and it was looking real bad. So you had writers looking to, again, protect Scott Summers' image, because Scott Summers was the face of the X-Men as Cyclops, and as the face and the leader of the X-Men, they couldn't have him going out here looking like the whoremonger and womanizer that he was. So they would go out here and look to either kill every woman that Scott was involved with in order to try to protect his image. So again, Emma Frost was never really jealous of Scott Summers and Jean Grey's marriage or relationship. Oftentimes, when you have women out here, they will see a man with a woman, and what they will do is, because they want to go out here and get that attention for themselves, they will go out here and make a move on a dude. But it's up to that dude to have character to check that woman and say, hey, look, I'm already with a lady. I'm not getting him even try to get with you. So they would let a woman know from the first minute, look, I'm already with somebody, and if I'm with somebody, I can't really go out here and be with you, because that's just not how it rolls when you're in a monogamous relationship. Now, if this was polygyny, your Scott Summers could have both women, and I guess they have that going on in the modern X-Men books, but they make it where your Jean is with Logan and your Scott Summers, which is, I don't know about that, but the whole thing is, they always look to protect Cyclops' image, and that's what they're doing and did in the pages of the X-Men, because most comic fans always looked at Scott Summers as a great hero and a great leader, but your Scott Summers was basically ruined and had his image tarnished by Chris Claremont, who really was looking to try to move the Jean Grey character forward, but then they brought Jean Grey back. And sadly, this wound up turning Scott Summers into a whoremonger male, because what happened with Scott Summers was he was out here, he abandoned his family, he cheated on his wife, Madeline Pryor, and then he cheated on his wife once again, Jean Grey, when he finally got Jean Grey and got his life all smooth. So what we see with Scott Summers is that he was the major problem. And again, Emma was never really jealous of Scott and Jean's relationship. She basically was doing what many females do when they see a married man in some cases, and they want to go out here and try to see if they can take that dude. But at the end of the day, it is the dude who has to go out here and check the females and let them know that they want to be with their wife. And again, your Scott Summers was your basic whoremonger male, and his whoremongering is something that is not talked about in comics. Many comic fans talk about how great Cyclops is, but they don't talk about how he just mistreats women in relationships, and they don't really talk about that because it makes a lot of these comic fans uncomfortable to think about the idea that one of their heroes has a less than sterling character. And again, your Scott Summers really was the one doing dirt right around here to your Jean Grey, because he wanted a fantasy, he didn't want a person, and he didn't really care about the feelings of Jean or Madeline or Emma. He really didn't care about their feelings. He only cared about how he could fit them into his world, but he didn't really care about them as people. So your Cyclops, again, he's a great character who's a great leader, but the whole thing is he's not somebody anybody wants to follow as related to dating and relationships, and you don't really want to follow this character as related to dating and relationships, because he's following the beta male pattern of coveting another man's woman, pulling the dirty Mac, and then doing dirt and then hiding his hand. So that's something that many people don't really want to explore as related to the characters like Scott Summers. They really don't want to see how his character has been ruined. But when I look at his character, I see how the damage that Chris Claremont did, and I look at the damage it did because it took one of the great leaders of the X-Men and it really prevented him from becoming a truly great character. I mean, because other writers have to come in and clean up the mess, but this character is one that sadly many people don't look at, and because people look at Emma and what she did, but we really need to look at Scott Summers and the content of what makes his character a really dysfunctional man. Now, this was a video requested by a viewer, and if you want to request a video, you can send a donation to the Cash App or the PayPal by clicking the links in the description box, and if I know something about that subject, I will make that video for you. And if you want to pick up my first comic, Esteem No Good Deed, you can find that comic on Amazon's Kindle for 99 cents. And if you want to pick up some of my positive black fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, like the ISIS series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, you can find those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them on Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Yo, babe, we can meet later on? Scott, what are you doing? I'm trying to get my Mac with this, honey. I thought we were married. Well, I'm the original Dirty Mac. You didn't know? I'm the Dirty Mac, man. I was out here with the Phoenix before, when you were dead, and then I went out here and got with Marilyn Pryor after she died. So I've been getting with lots of honeys before you were even around. You stink. Well, I don't stink. I'm the Dirty Mac, man. I'm a Dirty Mac, baby. I get with all the ladies.
Now available in paperback and coming to Kindle Unlimited, John Haynes, Dark Succubus. The man who rules the world is tempted by a sultry succubus in this all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get John Haynes, Dark Succubus in paperback or pre-order on Kindle Unlimited today.